Like, these niggas got masks on, nigga. Hold on. 1 second. Put that in the bag for me.
Oh, just letting you know we rolling.
Dictionary. Shalom, Yahweh Shem Shai Baruch Thumb to all my brothers, Yahweh Shema Alathah Shem Shai, to all my sisters. We're the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. Started out at 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Today is our history class every Mondays from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Today we're going to talk about Judith. Why did I choose to talk about Judith? And why is Judith being remembered, thousands of years later? You know what I mean? What's so important about the history of a woman that was righteous and was used by the Most High when the leadership of Israel fell weak? Anytime you see the mention of a woman in the Bible that the Lord has used, when you think of what was the prophetess's name? Deborah, the prophetess, or Judith. Understand one thing, that these women are to be remembered and are to be praised for the righteous acts that they've done. And anytime our leadership falls weak, the Lord never established it for a woman to lead a nation. The only time a woman takes a leadership role is when the men in our nation have fallen weak. When our walls are down, our protection is down, our defense is down, our gates start to languish. And so Judith, what we'll present to you today is that Judith, in comparison to women in 2020, I mean, it's like night and day. You know what I mean? And the only people that have that same spirit, the only women that have that same spirit that Judith has, are the women in the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. Are the women that actually serve the Lord, right? And that actually fear the Lord. Christian women will tell you that they fear the Lord and that they praise the Lord every day and all this mumbo jumbo, when in actuality the God that they served is something that they've imagined in their simple minds, right? It's a God that caters to their emotions, right? But they don't worship the Most High in spirit and in truth. And what women like Judith understood was that the Most High was a man of war. And he was also someone that regarded Israel and that would pay vengeance to our enemies for the crimes that they've committed towards our people. When a Christian woman prays today, she doesn't pray for the death of her enemies. She doesn't pray for the deliverance of so-called Negroes, so-called Hispanics, so-called Native Indians. What she does pray for is she does pray for her oppressor, right? She does pray that her oppressor will one day treat her equal. One day, in her mind, she believes that one day she can be on her level, and this is the Christian way of thinking. It's a slave mentality that Christians have propagated on the earth that shows a clear sign of weakness. You know what I mean? Nobody respects a beggar. And guess what? Your oppressor does not respect anyone that begs, right? When you should be praying to the Most High, that the Most High, that the Most High destroys your enemies. Instead, what you're doing is you're praying for your enemies. You're praying for the success of America. You're praying for this kingdom, right? In your heart is clearly what's clearly written in your heart is God bless America, right? What's clearly written in your heart is love thy enemy.
Love thy enemy instead of your neighbor.
As thyself, right? And an enemy that you're talking about loving are the same people that have destroyed your family, that have raped and robbed and murdered your family. Well, Judith, who was a woman of God, who the Lord used when the leadership fell weak during the time of Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Assyria at the time. She prayed that for the fall of her enemies, right? She prayed that the Lord would use her, a woman, to defeat the one of the greatest armies in the world at that time. That's what she prayed for. You know what I mean? Now you tell me what women are praying for today.
Some red bottoms.
They're praying for some red bottoms. What are they praying for? That stimulus check. What else are they praying for? They're praying for everything that has nothing to do with the Most High. They're praying for things that cater to their will and not the Most High's will. When in actuality, what Judith was doing was Judith was praying for the Most High's will, right? Judith was crying unto the Lord that she could be a sacrifice, right, for her people, right? So that's why it's important to understand the kind of woman that Judith was, right? She was the kind of woman that used her beauty not for the sake of money, but used her beauty, right, for the deliverance of her people. All right, so let's get it. Let's start at let's get questions first. Any questions online? Get your questions out the way. We're going to be going through the book of Judith, which is an excellent book. Many lessons can be learned in this book. And both men and women need to pay attention to this class to really get an idea of the kind of woman you should be looking for. The kind of woman that you should pray that the Most High sends you.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we'll find out what kind of woman is truly a righteous woman according to the Most High, right? Well, let's get questions.
Where you want me to go, sir? Where you want me to start?
Yeah, questions first. Any questions online?
Salaka, no questions, sir. So far, none that I see.
Give it another minute. Get them questions out the way. If you're in class today, sign in for attendance. If you have any questions, by all means, ask your questions. This is what these classes are for, right? These classes are deliver you from the lies and the deception and the brainwashing that you've been poisoned with your whole life. You know what I mean? The ICBK under Commander General Yohana is the cure to your mental illness. And Christianity has created onslaught of people with mental illnesses. And the Most High has ordained the men in the UPK under Christ and under Commander General Yohana to heal the sick, right? Christ said this. He said the whole have no need for a physician, right? But the sick, right? And this is what we're here to do. This is what these classes are for. Don't take these classes for granted. You know what I mean? We have classes damn near every day of the week. Tune in and really set yourself free. I know today is 420. I wanted to go in on 420, right? But there ain't going to be no gathering for the 420. So let's thank the Lord for that. You know what I mean? Thank the Lord that y'all can't go into some park somewhere and gather for 420. Right? Those events are shut down. Have you heard of any events? Or is it just a bunch of loonies online doing their own 420?
Nah, I mean, I've been trying to spark up anger and conversation, and
if I go online and I see more than 10 people in that house, I might have to call the CDC on your ass.
Nobody's actually coming up for smoke or nothing. Like, it's quiet.
Very quiet. Hey, man, thank the Lord. The Lord disrupted these social gatherings, right? That would, if it wasn't for the corona, there would have been millions of ambassadors, right? Going out there, right? Burning a plant that wasn't designed to be burned, right? And further destroying their lives with a drug addiction. What is it classified as?
What you mean? Which class?
Marijuana. What is it classified as?
Criminal class?
Drug class.
Class D.
Class D, right? Which should be classified as a Class A drug. It should be, right? It's more destructive than most people think. And people don't realize that. People have been bamboozled by our enemy who wants us to celebrate 420, right? Black people, we're not capable of, we're not fit to be hippies. You know what I mean? Our oppressor, he can be a hippie and still function and still be an engineer, right? Mm-hmm. And still work at Wall Street and still strive in this kingdom. We can't do that. You know what I mean? As a majority, we cannot be hippies and still maintain a professional lifestyle.
Nope.
Right? You know what I'm saying?
Struggle waking up the next morning.
Right? Shaggy looked off in Scooby-Doo, right? He's probably an engineer right now. He's probably who knows what he is right now. He's all cleaned up by now. Correct? But yeah, let's get it. Let's go to Judith chapter 1.
Judith chapter 1.
Now let's do a little bit of history on this. I wanted to look it up online. I didn't get enough time to look at some sources, but let's look at some biblical history on what's going on right now. During the time of the book of Judith, there were two kings at war with one another. Nebuchadnezzar, who reigned in Nineveh at that time, in the days of, they call him Arphaxad. Let's look up Arphaxad real quick on the Zondervan Bible, or who they would call Xerxes, right? Let's look him up real quick. Just raise that book up real quick so people know where the source is coming from. It's coming from the raise it up a little higher. It's coming from the Zondervan Bible Dictionary. We recommend that you get this book. If there's any confusion as to any characters in the scriptures that you are not familiar with, look into the Zondervan Bible Dictionary. It's pretty, aside from, certain opinions, it's pretty factual for the most part. You might want to look it up under.
I'm almost there.
You got it?
Almost. Give me a sec. ARPH. I'm getting closer.
Got it?
There it is.
Go ahead.
Arphaxad.
Go ahead.
Arpachshad, third son of Shem, around 2479 BC. The first birth recorded after the flood. He lived 438 years and was the ancestor of Hebrews. No, this is a whole different person.
That's a different person. Look up Xerxes. Jump to Judith chapter 1, verse 11. So basically, Nebuchadnezzar went to war with Arphaxad. He was the king of the Medes. You probably look it up on the Xerxes, if you can find it under Xerxes. Let's see. And Nebuchadnezzar, warring with Arphaxad, he eventually wins the war. But before he went to war with Arphaxad, what you got to understand, did you find him? Yeah. Which is Xerxes. If you want to look up who he is, you look up Xerxes. Before he went to war with him, the kingdom stretched pretty far, right? From Samaria beyond the Jordan. We're talking about Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. And so he conquered and ruled many provinces. And at the time, before he went to war with the king of the Medes, Xerxes, we'll find out who Xerxes is right now. Go ahead.
Xerxes, king of the Persian Empire from 486 BC to 465 BC.
He was the king of the Persian and Mede Empire. Go ahead.
He is the same as Ahasuerus, mentioned in the book of Ezra, Esther, and Daniel. The main support for this identification is to be found in the linguistic equivalence of the names.
Go ahead.
In a close similarity.
So, Arphaxad, Xerxes, and Ahasuerus, those all tie in one. Go ahead.
And a close similarity has been noted between the character of Xerxes and the character of the king of the Persians portrayed in the book of Esther.
Go ahead.
Which are also historical correlations. Thus, the feast, which was held in the third year of the reign of Ahasuerus at Shushan, corresponds to an assembly held by Xerxes in the third year in preparation for the invasions of Greece.
Go ahead.
Herodotus states that Xerxes, following his defeat at Salamis and Palatia, consoled himself in his 7th year with the pleasures of the harem. Herodotus, the 9th, this parallels with biblical accounts which relates that Ahasuerus replaced Vashti by marrying Esther.
So now that's talking about, this is the same Osiris in the book of Esther, right? Read the book of Esther, you'll find out more about this king. He was going to, him and Nebuchadnezzar, can you look up Nebuchadnezzar? The reason why I'm bringing up these two kings is because around this time, this is when, once Nebuchadnezzar had defeated Xerxes or Arphaxad in this, what happened at that point is that Nebuchadnezzar had dominion of the whole earth at this time. You got Nebuchadnezzar?
Count out of one count.
What we're looking at right now. Go ahead. Give me start it right here.
Count out of one count. Nebuchadnezzar's father, Nabopolassar, seems to have been a general appointed by the Assyrian king.
Go ahead.
However, in the later years of Assyria, he rebelled and established himself as king of Babylon.
So, okay, let's read that. Read that part one more time.
Nebuchadnezzar's father, Nabopolassar, seems to have been a general appointed by the Assyrian king.
Go ahead.
However, in the later years of Assyria, he rebelled and established himself as king of Babylon.
Keep reading.
In 626 BC.
Go ahead.
The rebellion increased and finally, Nabopolassar with the Medes and the Scythians conquered Nineveh.
So now, this, who it's talking about here, this Nebuchadnezzar, is actually Nebuchadnezzar? Yeah, this is who we're talking about. Nebuchadnezzar. Keep reading.
Count out of one count. And the Assyrian capital in 612 BC.
Go ahead.
The Medes and Babylonians divided the Assyrian empire, and a treaty was probably sealed by the marriage of the Median princess
to the Babylonian
prince Nebuchadnezzar.
So now, Salakia. So Nebuchadnezzar's father was the one that established this, the Babylon and Assyria, right? He was the one that brought that together. His son married Nebuchadnezzar. Married who? He married
a Median princess. Her name was.
Do you remember?
Let me get it. I don't think they put.
Well,
her name
pull that up later. Let's just keep going on this because I want to get the history of that.
In 607, Salakia, the marriage of the Median princess to the Babylonian prince Nebuchadnezzar. In 607, the crown prince Nebuchadnezzar joined his father in the battle with the remnant of the Assyrian power and their allies, the Egyptians, in 605.
Go ahead.
When his father was in his last illness, he decisively defeated the Egyptians at Carchemish. At the time, Nebuchadnezzar took over all Syria and Palestine.
Okay, so now let me scroll down real quick. Let's see if we could find it. Get right into this part right here. So it talks about Daniel. Let's keep reading. It's pretty in depth. All right, let's see. Okay, so this doesn't really get into it.
I don't get the detail of every battle.
But no, it's not the battle that specific battle I wanted. But let's move on. So jump to verse 11.
Verse 11.
Start at verse. So what Nebuchadnezzar wanted was he wanted the nations that the nations that he conquered, including the Edomites, the Ammonites, the Moabites. He conquered damn near the whole world, right? He made a roll call and asked these nations to come join him in the battle against against what's his name, Xerxes, right? Against the king of the Medes, and they rejected the invitation to come join him in the battle. And because they rejected it, Nebuchadnezzar was heated, and he decided that once he won this battle, that he was going to seek vengeance on all the nations that rejected joining him in. It's sort of like when America goes to war, right? You think about the United Nations, right? And those that refuse to join America, those that refuse to join the United Nations, there will be some sort of recompense for refusing to join, right? Where Nebuchadnezzar at that time considered these people to be, even though he conquered these nations within these provinces, he still required some sort of loyalty and some sort of allyship between him and those that he conquered. But let's see what happens. Go ahead.
Judith chapter 1 verse 11.
Go ahead.
But all the inhabitants of the land made light of the commandment of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians.
So basically all these inhabitants made light of the commandments, right? Of what Nebuchadnezzar had said. So Nebuchadnezzar wanted all of them to roll with him to go fight, right? The king of Persia. But go ahead.
Count out on one count. Neither went they with him to the battle, for they were not afraid of him.
And they weren't afraid of Nebuchadnezzar, right? Xerxes was a very powerful man at that time, right? And Nebuchadnezzar hadn't fully established his dominion, right? His father was in rulership at that time, so now Nebuchadnezzar comes into the scene, and he still can't get the respect of the nations that he's conquered, right? And let's find out what happens.
Count out on one count. He was before them as one man, and they sent away his ambassadors from them without effect and with disgrace.
Go ahead.
Therefore, Nebuchadnezzar was very angry with all this country, and swear by his throne and kingdom that he would surely be avenged upon all the coasts of Cilicia and Damascus and Syria, and that he would slay with the sword all the inhabitants of the land of Moab.
Go ahead.
And the children of Ammon, and all Judea, and all that were in Egypt, till ye come to the borders of the two seas.
So now he promised that as soon as I'm done taking care of the king of Persia, the king of the Medes, I'm coming back for y'all, and I'm gonna let y'all know what it is when I come back, and I'm coming for blood, because y'all refuse to join me to battle. As he sends his ambassadors to these different parts of the land of Moab and Ammon and Judea, and he's trying to get them to come to battle with him. They basically had, like I said, they didn't fear him, so they told Nebuchadnezzar to kick rocks, which was a big mistake, because the kind of man Nebuchadnezzar was, he wanted to portray himself as God, right? He wanted to position himself as God, and we'll figure out what he did later on to have the whole world worship him. Go ahead.
Count out of one count.
Let's read that until the verse 16.
Then he marched in battle array with his power against King Arphaxad in the 17th year, and he prevailed in his battle, and he overthrew all the power of Arphaxad and all his horsemen and all his chariots.
Okay.
And became lord of the city.
So he defeated Xerxes or Arphaxad, and as he defeated him, he became lord of all the cities. And keep in mind, the Persian and Mede Empire stretched. It was a vast empire, right? And so he became lord over all those cities. Go ahead.
Count out of one count. And became lord of his cities, and came to Ecbatane, and took the towers, and spoiled the streets thereof, and turned the beauty thereof into shame. He took also a Faxad in the mountains of Rago,
Right.
and smote him with all his darts, and destroyed him utterly that day.
So Nebuchadnezzar ended up killing the king of the Medes, right? Go ahead.
So he returned afterwards to Nineveh, both he and all his company of sundry nations, being a very great multitude of men of war.
So now all the men that were fighting for the Persians became a part of Nebuchadnezzar's army, right? So now he had a great multitude of men now. I mean, his army was like the sands, like the sand of the sea. I mean, it was just innumerable. You know what I mean? It was a huge army, a huge host. Jump to verse 2 of the next chapter.
You want me to finish this verse?
No, it's all right.
Jump to verse 2.
Verse 2, yeah.
Judith chapter 2, verse 2. So he called unto him all his officers.
Right before that, right? Jump to that last line of verse 1.
Nebuchadnezzar, the end of, Judith.
Yeah, start at verse 1. Go ahead.
Judith 2, verse 1. In the 18th year, the 22nd day of the first month, there was talk in the house of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, that he should, as he said, avenge himself on all the earth.
And he's going to avenge himself. So basically, he said he was going to avenge himself on all the earth for everyone that took light of his commandments, right? Because this man right here had a God complex. His whole mission was to make sure that the whole world worshiped him. That was his whole MO, right? That he would be the God on the planet, right? Keep reading.
So he called unto him all his officers and all his nobles, and communicated with them his secret counsel, and concluded the afflicting of the whole earth out of his own mouth.
Go ahead.
Salakia. Then they decreed to destroy all flesh that did not obey the commandment of his mouth.
So at the end of the day, he pulled, Nebuchadnezzar basically pulled the what's his name? The Muhammad approach, right?
Get down, lay down.
The whole get down or lay down approach, meaning he was very wrathful for the fact that the everyone on the planet that he had commanded to come join him did not join him. So now the next wave is to go and kill all flesh that would refuse to join him, to spoil all these nations, and to really rule the planet Earth with a rod of iron, right? With an iron fist. Keep going. Hey, go jump to Salaki. Let me just get that. Jump to verse. Let's see. Let me see. 13.
Judith chapter 2, verse 13.
Give me one second. So now what he does is he elects Olophanes. Olophanes was basically, he was the second man in charge, right? under Nebuchadnezzar, right? He was the second man in charge. And Olophanes, he was a very loyal servant. I mean, he looked at Nebuchadnezzar like he was a god, right? And so Nebuchadnezzar told him to go and round up the men of war, valiant men, and go from province to province. All the people that took light of what he said when it was time to go and fight Xerxes, he went from province to province, and he raised hell in the kingdom. You know what I mean? For anyone that wasn't in allegiance with him, right? He raised hell in the kingdom. So he brought this man Olophanes, who was terrible in the sense where he ravished these provinces, he ravished these nations. Jump to so basically chapter 2 is just talking about him going from basically just going throughout the kingdom, and then there were certain men that just they had to meet him at the gate and just say, hey, we're with you, Salakia. You know what I mean? Like, they were hearing that all these other provinces were getting ravished and destroyed and spoiled, and he was just going from one to the other to accomplish and deliver everything that Nebuchadnezzar had said, to basically establish his Nebuchadnezzar's deity status to every nation on the planet. And that was what was going on. Now, you jump to chapter 3.
Judith, chapter 3, verse 1. So they sent ambassadors unto him to treat of peace, saying, Behold, we the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, the great king, lie before thee. Use us as shall be good in thy sight.
So basically at this point, after the first couple of nations got destroyed, next time Olophanes and the army came around, they were just like, hey, you can have everything. You can have, our homes, our land, use us for whatever you want to use us for, because great fear came on all people. And a lot of kings are known for that. You know what I mean? A lot of kings feel like the more cruelty that I bring and the more presence of cruelty that I bring, the more dominion and the more fear that I can bring among people. And really, that's the case. The case is to really bring fear amongst the people. That way you're able to establish your dominion. You know what I mean? And it's a fear tactic that Nebuchadnezzar was doing at that time. Jump to verse 8.
Judith, chapter 3, verse 8. Yet he did cast down their frontiers and cut down.
Jump to verse 7, right? So basically, here's what Nebuchadnezzar decided to do. Nebuchadnezzar decided that the only way these people are going to worship me as God is if I take away their gods, right? Is if I take away their statues and their idols, and if I destroy their idols. It was the same way with certain kings of Israel, right? When you read the book of Chronicles, or when you read the book of Kings, right? Certain kings did evil in the sight of the Lord, right? And they set up groves, and they set up idols in the land, right? And there was other kings that were righteous in the sight of the Lord that destroyed the idols and destroyed the groves, right? And this is how you get a people to just worship one God instead of worshiping many gods. You have to destroy their gods, their handmade gods, their groves. You got to destroy all that. You got to destroy the whole infrastructure of whatever God they believe in. So Nebuchadnezzar, he realized that as I'm going from province to province, what I have to do is I have to destroy all their gods. And once I destroy their gods, then they'll worship me. And this is what he was doing. We'll read it in verse 7.
Judith chapter 3, verse 7. So they in all the country round about received them with garlands, with dances, and with timbrels.
So when they see this army coming, they start having a celebration. They start dancing. They got timbrels. They use a real. This was a real Christian moment, right? It was a sign of submission. It was a sign of, we're happy you're here. We're here because we're here to serve you, right? Imagine, right, an army's coming at your door, right? And all of a sudden, you got, everyone as they're coming, everyone's dancing, celebrating that they're here. It's like we're here to be under submission to you and to serve you. So we're celebrating. Now we're dancing and we're singing, and it's really a sign of fear as to why they were doing this. Keep reading.
Khan out of one Khan. Salakia. Verse 8. Yeah, he did cast down their frontiers and cut down their groves.
Right.
For he had decreed to destroy all the gods of the land.
And that was the decree that Nebuchadnezzar put in place, is to destroy all the gods of the land, right? Anything that you had worshipped at that time, the goal was to destroy it and to brainwash you to worshiping the God of the earth at that time, to worship in Nebuchadnezzar. That was the whole plan. That was the whole decree. Go ahead.
Khan Adawan Khan. That all nations should worship Nebuchadnezzar only.
Go ahead.
And that all tongues and tribes should call upon him as God.
Go ahead. And now,
Salaki.
Go ahead.
This is a typical tactic that's been used by Islam, that's been used by the Christian church.
That's right.
To force their beliefs onto the whole world.
That's right. That's right. It's by destroying their gods and implementing, a man as God, which is what Christians believe. Christians believe that, Caesar Borgia is their God. You know what I mean? You're absolutely right. And this is nothing new. This is old. You know what I mean? This is how it's always been. You conquer a nation, you take away their culture, you try to take away their identity, and most importantly, you take away the God that they serve. Whether it's Buddha, whether it's Allah, your goal is to take it away, right?
Verse 9?
No, we're going to jump out of that. Let's go to chapter 3, verse... that's chapter 4, verse 9.
Judith, chapter 4, verse 9.
So, let me just look at it real quick. Start at verse 1. Now, this is the part I'm getting to.
Judith, chapter 4, verse 1. Now the children of Israel that dwelt in Judea heard all that Holofernes, the chief captain of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, had done to the nations, and after what manner he had spoiled all their temples and brought them to naught.
Meaning he brought them to nothing. So now the children of Israel, they heard all that they have done, right? To all these other nations. And they were shook when they heard it. They were scared. They're like, oh. At this point, they're like, we got to get right with the Most High, because one thing about the children of Israel that we don't understand today is that anytime, any signs of trouble or any signs of evil coming coming towards our people, we always knew that we can always go to the Most High. Right? We always knew that. We always knew that we can always cry unto the Lord. And as a nation, we had to get right in order for the Lord to deliver us from any troubles that was coming our way. That's something we always knew. But when we heard about what Nebuchadnezzar has done to all the other nations, we were scared out of our mind, right? Give me a second. And we knew how these heathens got down when they would spoil our cities. So what do? We cried unto the Lord. And it's the same thing we should do today. What we don't understand is that we've been spoiled. Our nation has been destroyed. And instead, what do? We become passive, right? We allow our leaders to manipulate us and make it believe that we can be part of this place. We make it believe that we could suffice if we just, go into program. And it's one of the worst things you can do is to constantly be under the foot of your oppressor and to just submit when we should be fighting. And when I say fighting in this sense, is that I'm not talking about, it says this, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal but spiritual. What we should be fighting is our drug addiction. We should be fighting whoredom. We should be fighting, we should be fighting the things that are displeasing the Lord. We should try to, yes, go ahead.
Salaga, so what you're bringing out is so heavy because I know there was inner conflict amongst our people back then because, you had coons back then who would roll with the program. And then you have brothers who like, no, we're going to stand by our people. Because you got to remember, why did they reject Nebuchadnezzar's original commandment? You know why? Because it's against our law to get involved in heathen matters.
That's right.
We ain't supposed to pick side amongst heathens fighting heathens.
That's right. That's right.
So it was a righteous thing for the people of Judea to not get involved.
To mind their business.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing we should do today in this kingdom, is that we should mind our business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let all the other nations join their army and join their police force. But us, we should tend to ourselves, mind our business, and just maintain our infrastructure, maintain, our own schools and our own cities. But instead, we want to join them, right? We want to gather with all these other nations. And it's so heavy what you're saying. Jump to verse. So basically, here's the scenario, right? So now, the only thing about where the Israelites were established is that it was very hard to get into the land, right? Because it had a bunch of hills and it had passages where only 2 men can go in at a time to get into the land, right? They had we had borders, we had gates, right? And so it was a very where the land was situated, it would have been very difficult for them to break through. And so when this army came, they had to camp out. And what did they do? They did the same thing that they did to us in 70 AD when they sacked Jerusalem. They cut off the water supply. They cut off the food supply. And they just played the waiting game, right? That's how our kingdom was set up. It was such a unique setup that it was advantageous to us during war. And that's something that we got to realize. Go ahead. Jump to verse 7.
Judith chapter 4, verse 7.
So this is talking about them preparing for war, right? Even though they're scared out their mind, they still want to prepare, get the victuals ready, the food and all that. This is them preparing. Jump to verse 7.
Judith chapter 4, verse 7. Charging them to keep the passages of the hill country, for by then there was an entrance into Judea, and it was easy to stop them that would come up, because the passage was straight, for 2 men at the most.
Go ahead.
And the children of Israel did as Joachim the high priest had commanded.
Jump to verse 9.
Then every man of Israel cried to the Most High with great fervency.
Right. Now, keep in mind, here's the key words. It says every man cried. So what this is telling you is that every man at that time, they were not worshiping other gods, is what it's saying. Right? Keep reading.
Khan. And with great vehemency did they humble their souls.
And the reason why they did that, keep reading.
Both they and their wives.
And their wives did it too, right?
And their children.
Yeah.
And their cattle.
Go ahead.
And every stranger and hireling and their servants brought with money. But put sackcloth upon their loins.
And that's what we used to do. We used to put sackcloth upon our loins during the time. It was a time where Israel was mourning. They were crying onto the Lord because they didn't want to go back into captivity. Now, keep in mind, during the time of Nehemiah had favor from the king, I believe King Darius, and he was able to establish the temple again, right? And the temple was resurrected again. And they started to come and build this nation back up, right? Because Nehemiah had favor from the king. And the king gave him a decree to go and rebuild Jerusalem. But go ahead.
Khan. Verse 11. Does every man and woman...
So jump to verse 13.
Judith chapter 4, verse 13.
Start at verse 12.
Judith chapter 4, verse 12. And cried to the power of Israel, all with one consent earnestly.
All with what?
One consent
Come
earnestly.
on, man. If we can cry on to the Lord, if all black and Hispanic and Native Indian people can cry on to the Lord and pray on to the Lord with one consent. Imagine a Passover where we just took over New York. All the brothers and sisters. I mean, it wouldn't even be big enough. We would have to have, I don't know what place would be big enough to hold all black and Hispanic and so-called Native Indian people.
Probably all the original 13 colonies.
Yeah, exactly, right? We would need all the original 13 colonies. Imagine if we all were in one spirit, right? And we all cried on to the Lord, right? And with one consent. Keep reading.
Khan. That he would not give their children for a prey, and their wives for a spoil.
And why don't we do that? Because you know what we're doing? We've rebelled against the Most High, and our children are a prey to our oppressors, to the other nations. Right? Look at the adoption agencies, right? Them black babies go for a little bit more, don't they? You know what I mean?
God.
Look at the adoption agencies, right? Look at the prison systems. Look at the broken families, right? Look at the DSS that's in our lives, right? We should be praying to the Lord that our children don't fall prey to our oppressor, right? we should just be praying to the Lord for our children that they don't fall prey to anything that's harmful, right?
Right.
Definitely the Christian church is very harmful. We should pray that, listen, this COVID-19, thank the Lord that the Christian church is shut down.
Come.
Right? I can guarantee you, if you check the statistics, there are less children that have been molested in the last 4 weeks than there's ever been. Right? The count is very low, right? Because they're not in that church, right? Now, in their homes, I don't know. That's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story. Now, those are Christians at work in the home. But go ahead.
Con out of one con. Salakia. And their wives for spoil, and the cities of the inheritance to destruction, and the sanctuary to profanation and reproach, and for the nations to rejoice at. And
what did God do? Read verse 13 when we cried on to him.
Verse 13. So God heard their prayers.
He heard what?
Their prayers.
He heard our prayers because we was all in one consent. And the only reason we was crying on to the Lord is we was trying to tell the Lord that we don't have any idols on the land right now. You know what I'm saying? We're not worshiping other gods. Everyone's in one consent. They're praying to one God. You tell me right now if everyone's in one consent when we pray. Some brothers are praying to Allah. Some brothers are praying to white Jesus. Everyone's praying to a different God. That's the problem. And that's why the Lord does not hear us. Because we're all praying to different gods. Go ahead.
Con out of one con. The cities for their inheritance to destruction, and sanctuary to prophet. Salakia. Verse 13. So God heard their prayers and looked upon their affliction. For the people fasted many days in all Judea and Jerusalem before the sanctuary of the Lord Almighty.
Read verse 15, man.
Verse 15.
God saw he heard our prayers, man. You know what I'm saying? And he looked upon our afflictions. Go ahead.
Verse 15. And had ashes on their meat trees.
And had what?
Ashes on their meat trees.
This is talking about the priest at the priest at the time. The priests at the time wore mitris, right? And they had ashes on their mitris, right?
And cried unto the Lord with all their power.
So now we got that out the way. That's a little bit of history of what was going on before the army of Nebuchadnezzar came to the gates of Judea, of Jerusalem at the time. And so now chapter 5 is a very important chapter that we're going to get into right now. Understand that these other nations, right, knew our history. When we say that the leaders of this world, right, those that are in power, that they know that our history, they know the Lord that we serve, and they know when to step in and take action against us, and they know when to fall back because they know our history. They have our records. They know who we are. You know what I'm saying? They just want to keep you elusive and blinded by not knowing your own identity, by not knowing your own culture. They want that because the minute you start to understand who the hell you are, the minute you start saying I'm an Israelite and you say it with like it's natural, right? You say it like it's normal, right?
Yeah.
Like it's natural. They understand that when that starts to happen, then you'll start seeking the God that destroyed Egypt. Then you'll start calling upon him towards your affliction. And they know at that time their kingdom is over. Right? Their kingdom stands upon our knowledge of knowing who we are and worshiping our God. That's what their kingdom is. It's on the brinks of this of falling. As the men in the UBK are pushing out this truth, their kingdom is starting to crumble more and more, because now you're starting to, the brainwashing is starting to, it's starting to go away, and now you're starting to receive knowledge of who the hell you are. Once you start receiving knowledge of who the hell you are, once you start coming and receiving this truth from the men of the UPK, understand that this is something that is an act of war towards them. They understand that their kingdom is, they understand that they only have a little bit of time before their kingdom is destroyed. And let's go to verse 5 real quick, chapter 5. I want you to read this thing real quick.
Judith chapter 5, verse 5.
This is a good one right here.
This said, Archeor, the captain of all the sons of Ammon.
Go ahead.
Let my Lord now hear a word from the mouth of thy servant, and I will declare unto thee the truth concerning this people.
So now, this guy, Achior, he knows the history of the Israelites, right?
Come.
And he's trying to let Holofernes know that there's two conditions with messing with these people, right? And I'm going to explain to you the two conditions before you decide to go and make war with these people. And you'll see this from time and time in the scriptures, where there's certain people that know our history and will warn someone to fall back when it comes to us. Right? Go ahead.
Khan, which dwelleth near thee, and inhabiteth the hill countries, and there shall no lie come out of the mouth of thy servant.
Go ahead.
This people are descendants of the Chaldeans.
So now he's talking about Abraham, right?
Come.
Abraham came from the area where the Chaldeans were, right?
Come.
That's what he's talking about. So he's giving you a history. He's given Holofernes a history of these people. Go ahead.
And they sojourned heretofore in Mesopotamia, because they would not follow the gods of their fathers,
Yep.
which were in the land of Chaldea. For they left the way of their ancestors.
What thing you in?
I'm on 8 now.
Go ahead.
For they left the way of their ancestors and worshiped the God of heaven, the God whom they knew. So they cast them out from the face of their gods, and they fled into Mesopotamia and sojourned there many days.
Go ahead.
Then their God commanded them to depart from the place where they sojourned and to go into the land of Canaan.
So he's breaking down the book of Genesis right now.
Come.
Right? He's breaking down the book of Exodus. He's breaking down us being in the wilderness. And he's breaking down how Joshua led us on a war campaign to take the land of Canaan, right? He's breaking down the whole history to this heathen who has no idea who he's messing with. Go ahead.
Where they dwelt and were increased with gold and silver and with very much cattle. But when a famine covered all the land of Canaan, they went down into Egypt and sojourned there, while they were nourished and became there a great multitude.
See, keep in mind, when Jacob and in his household, Joseph was already in Egypt. When they came to Egypt, they were only 80 deep. When they came out of Egypt 40 years later, they multiplied greatly, right? So he's explaining that. Go ahead.
Count. So that one could not number their nation. Therefore, the children of Egypt rose up against them.
The king of Egypt.
The king of Egypt rose up against them and dealt subtly
and brought them low.
And brought them low with laboring in brick and made them slaves.
So this guy, the captain of the Ammonites, he knows the story of these people. And he's trying to explain to him, like, let me just break this down, like who you're dealing with right now, right? Keep reading. He's breaking it down right now.
Verse 12. Then they cried unto their power, and he smote all the land of Egypt with incurable plagues.
In what?
Incurable plagues.
Let me tell you something. The COVID-19 is an incurable plague. You think? Listen, you come up with a vaccine for this strain. Guess what? The virus starts to multiply and it starts to mutate, right? It starts to take a life form of its own. It starts to mutate. Now you got to come up with another vaccine. You got to come up with another cure, man. When the Lord pulls out his plagues on America, it's going to be incurable. No matter what the World Health Organization is trying to do, trying to race for time, and the CDC, it's going to be incurable. Go ahead.
So the Egyptians cast them out of their sights. Verse 13. And God dried the Red Sea before them and brought them to Mount Sinai and
Sinai
and Kadesh Barnea, and cast forth all that dwelt in the wilderness.
Go ahead.
So they dwelt in the land of the Amorites, and they destroyed by their strength all them of Esabon and passing over.
So basically, what he's talking about right here, jump to verse 17. But what he's talking about is how the Lord, when we came out the wilderness, that we were supposed to drive these nations out of the land of Canaan, because that's the land that the Lord was going to give to the children of Israel. Go ahead. 17.
Verse 17. And whilst they sinned not before.
While they what?
Whilst they sinned not before.
While we sinned not. Right? Go ahead.
Whilst they sinned not before their God, they prospered.
And that's how we prosper, man. When we sin not before our Lord, before the Most High, we will prosper. It's always been like that. Ain't nothing changed in 2020. It's always been like that. When we sin before the Lord, we go into captivity. We go under distress. Evil pursues us. When we don't sin before the Lord, we always prosper. Black people want to know you think that money's going to help us? Money's not going to help us, man. You know what I mean? Money won't help us. Only the Most High can help us in our dire need in this place, in our dire situation in this place. Go ahead.
Khan out on Khan. Because the God that hateth iniquity was with them. But when they departed from the way which he appointed them.
Well, when we left and departed from the way, which is the way is what? His laws, his statutes, and his commandments, right? And we started to go. Keep reading.
Khan out on Khan. But when they departed from the way which he appointed them, they were destroyed in many battles very sore.
And we were destroyed in many battles and went into many captivities. And were very sore. Go ahead.
And were led captives into the land that was not theirs.
Which is America, right?
Khan.
Which is South America, which is Mexico. Lands that are not ours. You can go all over the world now. China, wherever we're at. Europe. Right? We were led into those lands because we did not follow the way that the Lord appointed for us. That's the problem. It's always been like that. This ain't rocket science. Understanding the Most High and the who's and what and the why and understanding the whys of why our condition in this place. It's not hard to understand why. Right? But go ahead.
And the temple of their God was cast to the ground.
Go ahead.
And their cities were taken by enemies.
All right. So now let's just stop right there. Jump to verse 20.
Verse 20. Now therefore, my Lord and Governor, if there be any error against this people, and they sin against
start at 19 actually.
Verse 19.
Yeah.
But now are they returned to their God, and are come up from the places where they were scattered.
And this is now think about the timeline after the time of Nehemiah, right? When we went into captivity, right? And we got out of that captivity and we're able to establish, and we went back to serving our God again, right? Now in the lands that we were driven to, we were scattered. Now we have come back to Jerusalem, right? Go ahead.
Kind out of one kind. Salakia. And have possessed Jerusalem.
Now jump to 20.
Now therefore, my Lord and Governor, if there be any error against this people and they sin against their power.
And this is what it's all about. If there's any error against us, if there's anything that's lacking with us in the Most High, and we sin against the Most High, he's letting Epiphanes, the captain of Nebuchadnezzar's army, he's letting him know that if you can find any error in these people and anything that they're doing that goes against the Most High, keep reading.
Kind out of one kind. Against people, and they sin against their God, let us consider that this shall be their ruin.
And he knew. See, this is what I mean when I tell you the other nations know who we are. Which is why, our oppressor has set it up so that we could sin against the Lord, right? Which is why he pushes pork in front of us, right? He pushes pork all day. He pushes weed. 420s today, right? He wants you to go out and smoke weed. And he wants you to just celebrate 420 and celebrate the god Shiva. You know what I'm saying? He wants you to burn it down today because he knows every time you light up a blunt, those are the errors of your ways, of our ways. For every man that lights up a blunt. See, the Lord, he judges nations. He judges us as a whole, right? I'll give you an example. During the transatlantic slave trade, when we was in those ships, was every man wicked?
No.
There were righteous men in there. And they went in them ships too. You hear what I'm saying? So we're judged as a nation. So for every time you smoke a blunt today, and you are celebrating your 420, understand that this is the era that he's talking about. This is the era of the people. This is you and us sinning before the Lord. You know what I'm saying? Which is why we were very, which is why we took drastic measures to make sure that a man didn't sleep with his father's wife. We took drastic measures to make sure that there was no witches in the land, right? We were under the school of Moses, where if you was a whore, you would get stoned to death, you and the offender, right? Because we knew that we had to get those people out of here. We had to take them out of commission so the Most High can be with us. You know what I mean? But go ahead.
Kind out of one kind. And let us go up, and we shall overcome them. But if there be no iniquity in their nation,
if there be no weed smoking amongst black and Hispanic people, if there be no homosexuality amongst black and Hispanic people, read that line one more time, the first time.
But if there be no iniquity in their nation,
there be no Christmas, no Thanksgiving, no American holidays, no eating pork, shrimp, crab, and lobster. If there be none of those things that displease the Lord in our nation, read.
Let my Lord now pass by.
He said, if you can't find any of that amongst them, you might as well keep it moving. Move on to the next people that you want to spoil. It's not happening. And this displeased Epiphanes. He's like, see, people in power expect to hear good words, right? They want to hear counsel that pleases them. This was a counsel that this brother gave him, that if he had listened, he would have still had his head on his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You could do whatever you want to everyone else around us, but this nation right here, leave alone. And here's what our oppressor doesn't understand. YouTube, if you're listening, whatever. You know, he probably shut it down. But here's what our oppressor doesn't understand, is that if there be no error, we can shut down every Christian church. If we could get rid of all the what are the
pedophiles, drug dealers,
the pedophiles, the drug dealers, if we can clean up our act and present ourselves as a chaste virgin to Christ and the Most High, Lord, you're in trouble. Our oppressor's in trouble.
Done.
It's a done deal. You know what I mean? But go ahead, keep reading.
Kind out of one kind. And we become Salakia. Pass by lest their Lord defend them, and their God be for them, and we become a reproach before all the world.
Now, when he said this, right? Keep in mind, his Alophanes host his armies right there, and they're listening.
And counsel.
And they're in council. And when he said it, it brought fear into their heart. Because he's hearing the stories of this God that opened up the Red Sea. He's hearing the stories about these people. And he's letting them know, yo, you can't beat these guys if they're serving the Lord. Now, keep in mind, Alophanes, he gets heated. He's like, that's not what I wanted to hear.
Not at all.
And they take him and they tie him up and they go up to the hills from one of the passages where the Israelites had guard, and they roll him down the hill, right? And so now let's jump into the brink of the story. So now we got all that out the way, right? So we know that our enemy has been given the warning from this heathen, Achior. He was the captain of the Ammons, right? So now, we at chapter 7?
We was in 5, verse 22.
Let's see, Slaki. Yeah, so I explained how they took him, and Alophanes, he's basically like, once I defeat these people, you're going to die with them. Once it's all said and done, he was mad at this captain of the I believe it was of the Ammonite army. He was mad at him. He said, once I defeat him, you're gonna die with him. And that's when they tied him up and they dropped him down the hill, and then the Israelites came and scooped him up. And when he came and scooped him up, he told them what was about to go down, right? So now they got the inside scoop on what was about to go down. Jump to verse 7, chapter 7.
7, verse 7.
So basically, in chapter 7, let me just fast forward. Chapter 7. So what they do is they set up garrisons all over the kingdom, right? All over Judea, so that no man can go in or out. And what they do is they go to a place called Bethulia, right? And Bethulia is where the water supply was going in. And so they cut that off by taking that over. So now there's no water supply that's going into Judea. And so now the children of Israel, they're distressed. They're like, you go a day or two without water. You ready to give up, right? You ready to throw in the towel. Jump to verse 13. 7 and 13.
Judith in the Apocrypha, chapter 7, verse 13.
Go ahead.
For all the inhabitants of Bethulia have their water thence, so shall thirst kill them, and they shall give up their city.
So now they do the same tactic. It's a very. This is. When you want to talk about a book of war, you can learn a lot of methods of starving out a city. Right? Setting up a fortress around the city to starve them out. And eventually the people will start to go insane, and they'll start to go crazy, and they'll start to come against the leaders, and there'll start to be a divide in the city. So they cut off their water supply in this verse. Jump to
Salaki, sir.
Yeah.
Just cutting off the water. Pay attention to Flint, Michigan. That's all I want to say. Pay close attention to Flint, Michigan.
Pay attention to Flint, Michigan. Pay attention to it was the same tactic that they did when they seized Jerusalem in 70 A.D. They cut off their food and water supply. It was the same way that the Gauls defeated the Romans. They went around the city and they cut off their food and water supply. To the point when they did it to us, we were eating our leather belts, our children. You know what I mean? There's so much. Your mind starts to really go into an asylum, right? When you're hungry and thirsty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
And they shall give up their city, and we and our people shall go up to the tops of the mountains that are near, and we will camp upon them.
Now jump to verse 19.
Judith in the Apocrypha, chapter 7, verse 19. Then the children of Israel cried unto the Lord their power, because their hearts failed, and all their enemies had compassed them round about.
Go ahead.
And there was no way to escape out from among them. Thus all the company of Assur remained about them, but their footmen, chariots, horsemen, 34 days.
So here's what's happening during this time, right? So now that the food and water supply is cut off, right? And they see a huge, imagine you're looking out and you're at the secure points looking out on the towers and you see an army, an innumerable army. Basically, you see in the whole world, right? The army of the world outside of Judea. And the food and water supply is cut off. And so now everyone starts to go into panic mode, right? The young men are fainted of thirst. And, the people don't have any strength in them. And so what do they always do? They go to who? They go to the leadership. And they start complaining and they start voicing themselves to the leadership. And here's what they were willing to do. Instead of putting faith in the Most High, that the Most High can deliver them, right? What do? They decide to what? It's the whole Christian mentality. They decide to submit to the enemy.
Toilet paper.
You're exactly.
What they did.
Yeah.
They bought all the toilet paper.
They bought all the toilet paper. They panicked. You know what I mean? That's exactly what they That's exactly what they did. They panicked. And so now, here's what they said. Jump to verse 24.
Verse 24.
Here's what they said to the elders during this time. Go ahead.
God be judged between us and you, for ye have done us great injury.
Well, now, how did the leadership at that time do them great injury?
Salaki, sir, if I may. They did them great injury because the simple fact is, they believe the way they seen it, the Most High is against them because these nations are against them.
That's right. That's how they're looking at it.
But
right.
That's not the truth.
Exactly. Go ahead.
Count out of one count. Where was I at again?
Start at verse 24.
24. Oh, count. In that ye have not required peace of the children of Assur.
Now, what does the Bible say about peace? This is one of your
not
favorites.
seek their peace.
The Lord told us to not seek their peace or their wealth.
Come.
The hell with their peace, right? You know who we serve? We serve the Most High. The hell we need you need our peace.
God.
That's how you got to think. They need our peace, right? But this is the mentality of Christians that are passive,
right?
That don't have any fight in them. Right. You know what I'm saying? This is the result of singing and dancing all day, right? It's the result of raising weak men, right? This is the result of that. This is the result of not having any leadership. And guess who was doing all the crying? The women were crying to their men, and the men were going to the elders crying to them.
Con.
You know what I mean? Men that were weak, that were not willing to stand up. Right? Go ahead.
But verse 25. For now we have no helper, but God hath sold us into their hands, that we should be thrown down before them with thirst and great destruction.
And here's what they say in verse 26.
Verse 26. Now therefore call them unto you, and deliver the whole city for a spoil to the people of Holofernes and to all his army.
So they're willing to deliver up the whole city and have the whole city destroyed, their women ravished, and to have all that the Most High has put in place for them, to have that all taken and spoiled.
Good. This is no different from your Christian pastor, no different from the Christian church, because they are delivering you straight up to your enemy by telling you go out and vote, by telling you celebrate this, by telling you to pay tithes during this coronavirus, by selling you face masks for $150.
That's right.
You will support it.
That's
they
right.
are selling you straight up to your enemy.
That's right.
No different than these men.
That's right. You know what I'm saying? And understand, so now these people are willing to just give up their liberty, right? You tell me when the white man was willing to give up his liberty.
Never.
You know what he did? He picked up his gun. What's New Hampshire's slogan? To live or die trying.
Yeah.
That's his slogan. We don't think like that. That's why black Christianity and white Christianity are two different spectrums, right? White Christianity believes that they got to stand up for their rights. They got to stand up for their liberty. Black Christianity believes in submission, believes in forgiving their enemies. Equality. When there's no such thing as equality. Never will be. Even in the Lord's eyes, there's no equality. Right? Now let's get out of here. We know that now that they put on a begging spirit. Right? They're trying to beg their enemies for mercy. No justice, no peace, right? Hashtag Black Lives Matter. This is what this is right here. Now let's jump into Judith. Start at verse 8. Let's do the last 20 minutes of this. Here's a sister named Judith, right? This sister was a widow and her husband died. You know what I mean? He might have died from like a heat stroke, I believe. And so this woman was a widow, so she was in the time of her widowship where she was still mourning. She was in her sackcloth and ashes. But the thing about Judith is Judith was a beautiful woman. This was a bad broad right here, right? And the woman was highly praised by everybody, right? Give me, start at verse 11. And so she finds out what's going on because Achior comes in and he says he basically spills the bean after they delivered him into the hands of the children of Israel, and the children of Israel took him in as a good informant, right? You know, we take care of our informants too. We are looking for white Chinese informants. We're looking for all the informants that can give us the scoop.
I believe the Africans will make the best one.
Yeah, African. We're looking for all the informants. Come on in here. Give us the scoop. Let us know what it is, right? But go ahead.
Verse 12. And now, who are ye that have tempted God this day?
So now, because we said that the Lord has led us to our destruction, that we should give up the city, and the leadership allowed, and the leadership complied with the people. This is a righteous woman that comes up to the elders in the leadership and says this. Read it one more time.
And now who are ye that have tempted God this day, and stand instead of God among the children of men? And now try the Lord Almighty.
But ye shall 8 verse what?
8 verse 13 now.
Yeah, go ahead.
And now try the Lord Almighty.
He said, who are you to stand in God's stead and determine whether, that whether we should just give up and just give up the whole city, right?
Okay.
Who are you to make this promise to him, right? Because they said, would give us 5 days, right? And we'll see if the Lord delivers us. If not, then we'll give in. And then so she's coming in like checking them like, yo, y'all know how the Most High get down. Whether we go into captivity or not, you know how he gets down, right? Why are you tempting the Lord? But go ahead.
Kind out of one kind. Among the Salakia. Verse 14. For ye cannot find the depth of the heart of man, neither can ye perceive the things that he thinketh.
He's like, so let me ask. He's like, hold on. So you can't even understand how a man thinks, right? What's going on in the mind of a man, right? And how he thinks. But keep reading.
Then how can ye search out God?
Then how the hell do you know what God is going to decide for this nation? How do you know what God's thinking? How can you determine that, right? Go ahead.
That hath made all these things, and know his mind or comprehend his purpose.
Go ahead.
Nay, my brethren, provoke not the Lord our power to anger.
And that's what they did. They provoked the Lord to anger.
Righteous.
This woman was righteous. They provoked the Lord to anger. You never seek your enemy's peace. And Judith knew that. She knew that you should never seek the peace and wealth of your enemies. Why would you want to be a slave? And that's the problem with Black America. That's the problem with Black and Hispanics today. They want to be slaves. You voting is you electing to be a slave. You want to be a slave, right? You want to be under submission of your oppressor, of your slave master. But go ahead.
Instead of our king. Verse 15. For if he will not help us within these 5 days, he have power to defend us when he will.
Go ahead.
Even every day, or to destroy us before our enemies.
Go ahead.
Do not bind the counsels of the Lord our power, for God is not as man, he that he may be threatened, neither is he as the Son of Man, that he should be wavering.
So basically she's saying it's all about the Lord's mercy. You can't just say this is what God's going to do, or God has already delivered us and to our destruction, when you don't understand the mind of God, right? He could be wavering in the situation. He could have mercy in the situation, or he could deliver you, right? But here's what she says next.
Verse 17. Therefore let us wait for salvation of him.
Let us what?
Wait for salvation of him.
Let us wait. Let us be patient, right? As the Lord devises a plan to destroy our enemies, to kill our enemies. Let us wait. Go ahead.
And call upon him to help us. And he will hear our voice if it please him.
If it please him, he'll hear our voice. It's up to the Lord, man. You can't determine what the Lord is going to do and what he's not going to do. Right? The people talk about the Lord's going to kill the 2/3. What if he decides not to kill the 2/3? What if you are the 2/3? You know what I mean? How do you know you're not the 2/3? Right?
Yeah.
How do you know?
You don't, sir. You absolutely do not know.
Now jump to, we only have about like 15 minutes. Let's get to it. Jump to Salakia. We'll be at 8 right now. Jump to verse 9.
You mean Judith 8 and 9?
No, actually, so here's what Judith decides, right? Judith says, all right, well, Salaki, let me get there real quick. Jump to verse 31.
Judith chapter 8, verse 31.
Jump to verse 32.
32.
While y'all women too busy, not caring about your nation, too busy twerking online, and not considering what you can do to help your nation, right? Here's what Judith decided to do. Jump to verse 32.
Verse 32. Then said Judith unto them, Hear me, and I will do a thing which shall go throughout all generations to the children of our nation.
Go ahead.
Ye shall stand this night in the gate, and I will go forth with my waiting women. And within the days that ye have promised to deliver the city to our enemies, the Lord will visit Israel by mine hand.
He's saying the Lord is going to use a woman to do the job because the men fell weak. It's the only time the Lord it's the only time where the leadership of Israel have taken counsel from a woman is when our leadership was weak, when our gates were languished. It's the only time, right? Which goes to show that's the time the Lord has to use a woman to deliver his people, because the men of our people are weak and they're afraid, which is why in the Israelite School Universal Practical Knowledge we stand under the motto of no cowards, right? We try to kill the weakness that's in you, right? Jump to chapter 9.
Judith chapter 9, verse 1. Judith fell upon her face.
Now, in chapter 9, Judith is praying that the Lord gives her the strength, right? And allows her to use her cunningness in the situation to destroy her enemy. She's actually praying that the Lord uses her to destroy your enemies. You tell me what Christian woman does that. And you know what I'm saying? Tell me what Christian woman prays that the Lord uses her, not for her behind, not for her big butt and a smile, right?
Right.
But uses her to deceive her enemies and to destroy her enemies. No, Christian women don't pray for that, right?
Right.
Jump to chapter 10. Read verse 9. All women should read this and understand what Judith was praying about and crying to the Lord about. Read verse 10.
Verse 10 or chapter 10?
Chapter 10. That's all I do.
Chapter 10, verse what?
Start at verse 1. Let's get this right.
Chapter 10, verse 1. Now after that she had ceased to cry unto the Lord of Israel, unto the power of Israel, and had made an error of all these made an end of all these words, she rose where she had fallen down, and called her maid, and went down into the house in the which she abode in the Sabbath days, and in her feast days.
Read verse 3.
And pulled off the sackcloth which she had on, and put off the garments of her widowhood, and washed her body all over with water, and anointed herself with precious ointment, and braided the hair of her head, and put on a tire upon it.
Let me tell you something, man. This sister right here, she knew this is another kind of warfare. That if a woman knew how to exercise today, Lord, who knows what we would be. She knew. The Bible talks about the beauty of a woman, right? And that a beauty of a woman can cause many men to fall, right? And understand that she knew how to use her beauty and her sex appeal to destroy her enemies.
Right.
She didn't use it for lucre's sake, for money and for gain. She did it for her people. And this was a bad broad right here. And she's over here. She took off the sackcloth of her widowhood, and she put on that. She put on an outfit that had every man turning, and she was still dressed modestly.
Right.
She wasn't dressed like a whore because she was a righteous woman, right? All right, let's go.
Verse
Well, give me a second. Okay. So now So basically, so now she takes her and a couple of her the women that used to wait on her. They go out to the gates. The elders of Israel let her out, right? And so the men of the army of Olophanes comes and sees her, and brings her to Olophanes, right? And as she's walking through the camp, as they're walking her through the camp, her beauty is so striking that all the men are like, it's like the talk of the town, like, who is this woman right here? This bad broad walking through here like this, right? Mm-hmm. So he has everyone basically stunned, right? So when she meets Olophanes, she sets it up to the point where she's acting like she's trying to help them defeat her people, right? Like she's trying to help him devise a plan to get into the city, right? So she's playing it off, right? And she's also telling him that if these people don't serve their God and they do wicked in the sight of their God, that you can defeat them. But she knew damn well that the people didn't set up groves and they weren't worshiping Baal at the time. And they were actually worshiping the Lord at the time. They weren't worshiping all these other gods. All those other gods were rid of out of the land, right? She knew that. So she was confident in that sense that her people, that the Lord would deliver her people because there were no errors in their ways in the sense that they were worshiping other gods. And it's really about worshiping other idols. You know what I'm saying? When you set up a Christmas tree in your house, you're worshiping an idol. Right? There was none of that in that land. It was a shame to eat pork. It was a shame to worship other gods and do wickedness. You know what I'm saying? People looked at you funny. And this was a woman that was praised amongst her people. Jump to verse 11, chapter 11. So basically, actually jump to 19 and verse 10 real quick.
Judith chapter 10 verse 19.
Actually, you know what? For sake of time, jump to so now so now Olophanes, he wants to set up a feast for this woman, right? And basically, have her eat. So she had already packed up her own food or whatever, but he wants her. From the beginning, he was trying to get in her pants. He was trying to get her, right? And so he wants to set up a feast, wine, and have her drinking. Because men know that if you have women drinking, they're going to make a mistake, right? Is what they call it. Oops, I made a mistake. And so he was trying to entice her to drink the whole time. And let's jump to chapter 11. Get to chapter 12, verse 1.
Chapter 12, verse 1. Then he commanded to bring her in where his plate was set, and bade that they...
No, actually, jump to chapter 13, verse 2.
13, verse 2.
Yep.
And Judith was left alone in the tent, and Olophanes lying alone upon his bed, for he was filled with wine.
Good.
Now Judith had commanded her maid to stand without her bedchamber.
Outside her bedchamber, basically.
Without her bedchamber, and to wait for her coming forth. And she did daily, for she said she would go forth to her prayers. And she spake to Bagoas according to the same purpose.
So for the 3 days that she was there, she would create a routine where she would go out for her prayers, right? Okay. And so she always had her servant just waiting for her, right? So she set it up in a way where they thought that when she would leave, she's just going out to her prayers. Keep reading.
Count out of one count. So all went forth, and none was left in the bedchamber, neither little nor great. Then Judah, standing by his bed, said in her heart.
What did she say in her mind?
O Lord God of all power, look at this present upon the works of mine hands, for the exaltation of Jerusalem.
Now, keep in mind, this is the listen.
Oh, she cold.
When Alophanes, right, was drinking, right, and he got drunk. This happened to be the one time where he got drunk more than any other time that he ever got drunk. This one time, right? Go ahead.
Con out of one con. Verse 4. So all went forth and none was
No,
left.
verse 5.
Oh, Slakia, verse 5. For now is the time to help thine inheritance and to execute thine enterprises to the destruction of the enemies.
Come on, what black and Hispanic women think about the destruction of her enemies? She thinks about helping her enemies, right? She don't think about the destruction of her enemies. I'm just trying to show you the mindset of a righteous woman that wants the salvation for her people, right? Go ahead.
Con out of one con. Which are risen against us. Then she came to the pillar of the bed, which was at Holofernes' head, and took down his fascion from thence.
Go ahead.
And approached to his bed, and took hold of the hair of his head, and said, Strengthen me, O Lord, power of Israel, this day. And she smote twice upon his neck with all her might.
So the first time she had that is, so she grabs his head, grabs his hair, right? This is the second most powerful man in Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. Grabs his head and grabs his hair, grabs the thing and the weapon and smotes it once and doesn't get it off. And she prays for the Lord to give her power to take the head off this heathen, and does it again, and it cuts his head clean off his head. And then what? Keep reading.
And she took away his head from him.
Go ahead.
And tumbled his body down from the bed, and pulled down the canopy from the pillars. And in after she went forth and gave Holofernes his head to her maid.
So now this woman cuts the head of her enemy off, and she used it by cunningness and deceit. By her beauty was not used for profit, but her beauty was used for the salvation of her people. She used it. The way she executed this whole strategy to kill the head of the snake. The way she executed it was done so beautiful, and takes the head and brings it back as evidence to encourage the men that she's going to show. And when she gets to the gate, she runs to the gate and she says, open the door, open the gates, open the gates. And so they all come out with, what do they call those? They all come out with flames, with stakes.
Torches?
Stakes, right?
Stakes and torches?
Yeah, stakes and torches. And they see her, it's nighttime, and she's like, she takes that head, man, she takes that head, she drops it on the floor. She said, this is the man you are afraid of, right? Done by the hand of a woman, because the Most High will use a woman when our leadership is weak. Go ahead.
Kind of. And you got these Hollywood making movies about, you know what I'm saying, this white Mary, about, you know, all types of black and Hispanic women who don't deserve such honor. But this is a movie.
This is one
As
of the
much
illest movies.
history is in this. This is something that should be honored and remembered forever.
Forever, and it is honored and remembered forever, especially in the Israelite universe proper knowledge. A woman like Judith should be praised, right? A woman like Judith should be honored, right? And guess what? When a sister comes into the school, that sister has the spirit of Judith. She prays for the fall of her enemies, for the salvation of her people.
Right.
And that's what it's all about, right? Despite Christian popular belief, we got to understand what kind of woman Judith was. Her prayers weren't the prayers of vanity. Her prayers catered to the will of the Most High. You know what I'm saying? She was the type of woman that when men would see her, when the people would see her, they would praise her husband because she was such a righteous woman. Now you tell me, black man, Hispanic, you tell me how people talk about your woman, right? How they praise your woman. This woman right here, she feared the Lord. And this is what it's all about. It's all about fearing the Lord. That's why she didn't want to eat from them heathens. She didn't want to eat any of their food.
Right.
She didn't want to drink none of their wine because she knew that these are people that are unclean in the sight of the Most High. That's why she brought her own food, right? So understand the kind of woman this woman was. When it came to an act of war, the Lord did not use an army. He used the woman, right? And when she dropped that head, what do you think the men did at that time? They looked at it and they looked at her. They were encouraged and they were ready to bring smoke, right? And with that, we'll probably next year we'll probably get into more Judith. But with that, we're going to class 857. With the Israelite School Universal Practical Knowledge. Tomorrow is Brotherhood class. Not sure who's teaching, but make sure you tune in from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Keep in mind, read the whole book of Judith. It's an excellent book, especially sisters. I want you to read this to really figure out what kind of spirit you should have and how you should present yourself to the Most High as a righteous woman. And with that, shalom.
Shalom.